Will everyone please join me in Gassho as I read the words of our founder, Master Shinran Shonin. Hence, I am now neither a monk nor one in worldly life. For this reason, I have taken the term Toku, stubble-haired, as my name, Master Genku and his disciples being banished to the provinces in different directions past a period of 5 years in exile. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namandats, namandats, namandats. Good morning, everyone. If my voice sounds a little funny to you, it's because I got over a cold. Don't worry, it is a cold. I took 2 COVID tests, both came up negative, and I'm actually feeling much, much better now. So, but unfortunately, being the good husband that I am, I gave the cold to Reverend Cindy, so she's taking a sick day from White River today. So I apologize. So if anyone from White River is watching this Dharma message, I sincerely apologize for that. But it's interesting. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about the concept of marriage in Buddhism, right? You know, marriage in Buddhism. The sad thing about our sect of Buddhism, or actually Japanese sects of Buddhism, is that lots of times we are associated only with death. And that's because in Japan, the usual cultural custom is that you were born as a Shinto, right? So when you were born, the parents take you to the Shinto shrine to receive blessings from the gods, so you are, given good fortune and luck throughout your life. And now these days, when you get married in Japan, they say you are married as a Christian. And that is because the white wedding has become so popular in Japan. So the brides enjoy wearing the white dress and the white gown. And in fact, they go all out for the wedding. They'll start the day off. It's a whole day affair. So they'll start the day off like in the morning wearing the traditional Japanese kimono and everything. And then in the afternoon, evening time, they'll switch to the white gown dress to wear and take pictures with. And even now, when they have these marriage ceremonies, they get married in these Christian halls, even though the family's not really Christian. It's just the style of doing it. But then, of course, when the death happens in the family, that's when you call the Buddhist priest to come and perform the funeral rites, or the pillow service rites. So sadly for myself as a Buddhist priest and many Buddhist priests in Japan, we kind of usually only get called when people are about to pass away or when they die. So people kind of associate our religion with death. But in actuality, there is, we have weddings as well. And if you choose to get married, you can get married at the Nishihonganji temple because they have a special hall just for that. Or, get married here at Tacoma Buddhist Temple. So, we can have a wedding here as well. But I also bring this up because I was recently in California where I performed the wedding ceremony for one of my closest childhood friends back from the days that we were going to Dharma school at the Sacramento Betsui. And so that's how long I've known this person. And they asked me to officiate the wedding, and of course I said that I would. But it really brought to the attention to me about the uniqueness of our sect of Buddhism in Jodo Shinshu, being that of the founder, Master Shinran Shonin. So one of the sort of, facades that was put upon monks back in that day was that monks took a vow of celibacy, right? They, didn't get married. Now, truth be told, in true historical context and true Japanese history, the Japanese monks of historical Japan never really adhered to that, to that vow of celibacy as seriously as the monks of Taiwan or China or Korea. Some of the monks did. Actually, Master Honin himself, it's documented that he was, single his whole life. But when you actually think about the religious establishment on Mount Hiei and Ryakuji, many of the monks actually had secret families. That's why they say, in the, the wife in the back of the temple, because the monk actually had a wife and a child, right? In a secret way. So while they, on the front side displayed this sort of like, well-established monk of, serious celibacy and everything, in the back of the temple, he had his family. Shinran, however, was one of the first monks of Japan to openly declare that he was married. So this was revolutionary at the time, and a little rebellious actually as well. And in fact, it was the fact that he had taken a wife. This was used as one of the reasons, as well as doctrinal ones, that he was banished from Kyoto in the first place. Now there's kind of religious scholarly debate as to whether or not Shinran had two wives or one wife. We know of the wife Eshini, where when he was living in Echigo. But in truth, right, like one of the legends goes that Shinran was actually talking to his master Honen about this sort of hang-up he was having. He's like, I really, like, the legend says is that he said, I'm really in love with this woman, but I'm a monk and I'm not supposed to do that. So what am I supposed to do? And Honen, according to legend, told him, the most important Buddhist practice that we have is saying Namo Amida Butsu, is the Nembutsu. So if getting married helps you to say the Nembutsu, go ahead and get married. If it doesn't help you say the Nembutsu, don't get married. So Shinran, according to legend, took a wife. But when we think about this concept in Buddhism altogether, right, aren't monks supposed to be celibate? So yes, Theravada monks and Chinese monks like from China and Korea and Taiwan are supposed to remain celibate, and they are not supposed to take wives. However, in Japan during the Meiji Restoration, the monks were actually forced to take wives. They were forced to actually have marriages that they would sign in documentation in order to keep their establishments and their temples in operation. So now, coming from all the way from the 1800s to today, you have many generations of temples that operate kind of like family businesses. And it's quite patriarchal as well, where the firstborn son has to take over the role. And if there is no firstborn son, if there's a daughter, she will marry a man who will then actually have to become ordained himself and take on the family name. Now, thankfully, Japan is actually progressing out of necessity. So they are just starting to open up the gates of allowing women to take on the role as jushoku, or head priest of a temple, just because of the population crisis. But thinking about all of this, it makes me wonder, when we think about the traditional idea of Buddhist monks or Buddhist clergy, people often get sort of surprised when I tell them I have a wife. And also, that's because I don't like to translate the term soryo, the Japanese term soryo. I don't like to translate that as minister. And I realized that it was, at the time, an arbitrary term that was chosen because we live in the United States of America. But the more accurate term of soryo in translation is priest. But when you think about the word priest, that word also has connotations and baggage. Priest would imply that I am celibate and do not have a wife. So when I tell them that I'm a Buddhist priest, but then I'm also married, people start to go, what? Wait a minute, how is that possible? And and all of their preconceptions start to kind of turn in their heads. But going back to the quote that I was talking about this morning, I'll read it again. Hence, I am now neither a monk nor one in worldly life. For this reason, I have taken the term toku, stubble-haired, as my name. So this was actually a reflection of the time that Master Shinran was actually defrocked by the central government in Japan at the time and was banished to the province of Echigo. And at that point, he kind of realized he's in this weird in-between. He's not a he's not a fully robed monk, but he's also not one of worldly life either. So what does that make him? All of these gray lines and things in the gray sort of started to come up with, in Shinran Shonin's head. But isn't that also how things are in our daily lives? When we think about, Buddhism or any type of other establishment or any type of thing that we're supposed to, even political parties, not that I'm going to get political in my Dharma talk, but if we label a person like a Democrat or a Republican, don't we kind of associate like a certain mindset, like, oh, that must mean you do this or you believe this. So if I call myself a Buddhist priest, don't we associate that with certain images and certain expectations? Now, if you grew up in the temple, of course, you've had time to sort of acclimate to this culture. But from a person who is new, or a person who is just new to Buddhism, they may have a certain perception in their minds, including that of what it means or what clergy are allowed to do, or in that time marriage. But when it comes to all Buddhists, right, not everyone who is a Buddhist is a monk. See, so there are people actually who still believe that in order to be called a Buddhist, you actually have to be a shaved-haired monk, who wears like orange or saffron robes. But in actuality, Buddhism is one of the great major religions of the world, and only a small portion of those people are monks, are clergy, or nuns. In fact, many of them are householders. And guess what? Buddhism is for them too. One of the misconceptions about Buddhism, even though we teach this concept of non-attachment, or things like, oh, you're not supposed to be attached to people or things, right, is the reality that we get married. We have feelings for people. We have emotional bonds with people. And, it is in this regard that I always approach weddings with a sense of great joy and a sense of great love. I think we all of us would love to go to weddings and would love to take part in ceremonies like this. And every time I do a wedding, it's always, a joyous and happy and wonderful occasion. But that is because when we think about the concept of Buddhism and what that has to do with marriage, it's not always connected, because many people have this conception that Buddhism means detachment. But in actuality, I think Buddhists, of all cultures, Buddhists of various sects, and Buddhists of all across the board can get married. And this is because you can have, in my personal opinion, a Buddhist marriage, which is what Shinran Shonin had. If you read the letters of the nun Ishini talking about her life with Shinran, you see this great sense of respect and adoration, but not only for her, for him, but of him for her as well. And even in today's world, two grown adult people who love each other and are consenting to marry each other should be met with a great sense of joy, compassion, and celebration. Because when we think about our daily lives and going through our daily lives, life is always wonderful with a partner or with someone to share our life with. Marriage, I think, is one of the great teachers of interdependence. It's very easy to say this, life is interdependence. But when you live with someone as a domestic partner or as a spouse, a marital spouse, you truly realize that you yourself don't live just for yourself. That you yourself can't think selfishly. Now again, this isn't to say that everybody should get married and that marriage is for everybody. If you are happy by yourself and you are happy being single, that is empowering as well. This Dharma talk is not a pressure to get married or to find somebody, but it's also to recognize that as Buddhists, we are very much in support of the institution of marriage as it is with two loving adults who wish to join their lives together. And then ending on this subject, the Buddhist Churches of America was one of the first institutions to openly marry gay couples in the United States. We don't get a lot of credit for that, I think, and I'm not saying that we're doing it for the glory or for the, or for the promotion. But at the same time, it should be understood that what I said was that when two grown adults who are consenting wish to be married, that is acceptable in Buddhism. That is encouraged in Buddhism. Loving another person and living a life of harmony, understanding, respect, and love is one of the, I think, greatest gifts that we can live in this life, regardless of who you are. So as I reflect on this marriage ceremony that I performed, and like I said, I performed it for one of my closest friends, it was deeply meaningful for me to once again go through the Kai Kyoshi Seiten and recite the Buddhist wedding and the statement of intent and all of those wonderful aspects, because it touched on a lot of points that go into, I think, a Buddhist marriage. So with this in mind, let us remember that our tradition of Jodo Shinshu Buddhism has a long history going back to the founder of marriage and happy marriage. Even though the marriage may have caused some external, political movings, but nonetheless, two people who came together to support each other in spreading the teaching of the Nembutsu, just as all of you who are married join together to support one another in your daily lives. And for those of you who are single and who are single and are not married, you are also very much empowered and you are cherished always by the community, by your friends, and by your family, and especially Amida Buddha. So with this in mind, I would like us all to really take a step back and appreciate the marriage that we have if you are married. Because after this wedding ceremony, even though my poor wife, with my poor wife being sick, I still came back from the wedding and I looked her right in the eye and I said, I am the luckiest man in the world to be married to you. Will you please join me in Gasho? Hence, I am now neither a monk nor one in worldly life. For this reason, I have taken the term Toku, stubble-headed, as my name. Master Genku and his disciples, being banished to the provinces in different directions, passed a period of 5 years in exile. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namandats, namandats, nam.